Hello everyone, welcome to the mains answer writing program. In this video discussion, we will be looking at questions regarding General Studies 2 paper, and the topics that we will be covering will belong to political parties, schemes and the governance related issues. So as you can see, there are three questions. One is regarding political parties to be brought under the Right to Information Act, the merits and demerits of such move. Then is regarding MG Narega, Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act. And the third is recently enacted law regarding Anusandhan National Research Foundation Act. So you can see the first question is about discuss the various merits and demerits of bringing political parties under the ambit of Right to Information Act 2005. So clearly there are two parts. After the introduction, we will hit the merits of such a move and then we will go to the demerits of such a move. So in the introduction, we can talk about transparency and its importance, because it is the transparency which is going to be bringing about accountability. Second thing, we can link it to the democracy. India is a multi-party democracy. It is unlike the countries such as China where single party is ruling. So here, multi-party democracy gives one advantage to the people or the electorate, that it allows electorate a meaningful choice to defeat the incumbent. Right? So because of being multi-party, the incumbent can be removed from power by the electorate. Okay. For that to happen, free and fair election has to be there. Right? All political parties should have fair chance of winning. There has to be a level playing field. And to make sure that there are level playing field, the party in power should not be too powerful to dominate, right? So how the party funding is happening? What is the organizational structure of parties? All things will matter, because some party, by virtue of its being the ruling party, will naturally attract more funding, and therefore it will have more resources at its disposal to actually being at a competitive advantage against the adversary political parties, right? So it is in this context that you can introduce the central theme of this question, where we have linked the right to information with the transparency and political parties with the multi-party democratic system in a country, right? Having given such context, we will now move to the merits. Now, what merits it will bring about once the political parties are brought under the ambit of Right to Information Act? It will naturally lead to more transparency and accountability. Now, it is these political party which will throw up the executive which will be ruling the country. So, putting political parties under the ambit of more transparency will also ensure the executive who will be ruling the country will also be actually reflection of such kind of accountability system that will be brought about by the Right to Information Act. Okay, for example, how the candidates are chosen, who will be given the ticket. So there has to be proper democratic process to choose the candidate, right? So internal elections might be there. In USA, there are such things. So every Republican party or Democratic party has to go through the organizational elections. First, they will nominate their own presidential candidate, and those two presidential candidates will ultimately go and contest the election. So there is democracy inside the functioning of political organization, right? So first, accountability has to be there at the organizational level, and then only higher accountability can be enforced at the executive level, because ultimately these political parties will be throwing the executive who will be governing the country. So therefore, to bringing them under the transparency is very, very important. Okay. Second thing, with transparency, how the funding of the political party is happening, people will be aware of it, right? And once people are aware of it, then only crony capitalism can be tackled. So informed electorate regarding the financing of the parties will lead to diminishing of crony capitalism. For example, let's say a political party P is getting funding from two business families A and B, right? And under the transparency rules, it is disclosed that these are the two wealthy individuals who have heavily donated to the political party. Now, once that political party forms the government, then people will be able to check the policies of the government. If these policies turn out to be biased in favor of these two individual or wealthy corporates, then people can hold these executive to account. So therefore, crony capitalism can also be curbed. This is one of the important merits of it. Third is reduced political corruption. Since opacity in the party funding will be curbed, and therefore corruption chances will also be reduced. There will be level playing field. As I have talked about free and fair election, we have to understand that all political parties should have level playing field. That means all political parties should have fair chance of winning the election and defeating the incumbent, right? So smaller political parties who are not having proper resources of funding, etc., they will also have an equal opportunity to defeat the incumbent, right? If the political parties are brought under the transparency regulations. Okay. Another important thing is this, is lack of intra-party democracy in India. Now, how the office bearers of various political parties are elected or selected, this is absolutely opaque process, right? What is happening, that opacity in the party financing leads to something called high command culture. And high command culture results in hero worship, which the B.R. Ambedkar also said, one of the greatest sins in a democracy. Hero worship has to be controlled, right? So this opacity in party financing demands that there has to be charismatic leader who will be able to attract the funding, right? And that charismatic leader will then introduce the top-down control. Top-down control over the organization. He will decide who will get the tickets in the election, etc. Right? So that is actually leading to high command culture. There are various party supremos in our country that we are all very familiar about, right? So these are some of the important things that can be diminished if not finished absolutely because of the transparency. Okay. Now we'll move to the demerits of the move. One of the first demerit, it will lose the privacy of the donors. Now donors may not want to be named or known. Why? Because donors do not know which political party might come to the power. So let's say the wealthy individuals A and B who donated to party P, that party P lost the election. Then what will happen? The party D which will come to the power, it will then start harassing these two businessmen, because their name became public, right? So now these businesses will be harassed unnecessarily. So this is one of the important demerits, right? So privacy of donors also is a very, very important pillar that we have to protect, right? Second thing, internal dissent and disruption might increase in the process, right? Because information will be available easily. So maybe some party leaders who might not be happy with certain decisions, and then if they come to know about the strategic planning behind those decisions, they might also come in public to justify their stand, right? So it will basically lead to the internal division and political instability as a whole, right? Now, strategic information leakages might actually disbalance the alliances, and it can also increase the horse trading and political instability, right? Because when alliances are formed, there has to be some common minimum program on the basis on which every other alliance partner is agreeing, right? And on the basis of that common minimum program, the government will function. Okay. Now, there are certain give and takes involved in the process. Okay. And if these give and takes are coming in public, so some political leader will find it just to justify to their own electorate. So in such a situation, those might want to defect. Also, the stronger political party who has better funding available might also resort to horse trading. It will lead to frequent formation of alliances and deformation of alliances. So various government will sworn in, and after 6-7 months they will be the government will go away and the new government and new alliance will form, right? So this can enhance the instability. Okay. Second is, it is possible that some frivolous request might also be made to the political party. So this is another one. It might impact on the free speech and association, because Article 19 grants the freedom of speech and expression, number one, and it also grants the freedom to form the association. So from it only flows, alongside the right to privacy, it flows that internal functioning has to be their private affairs, right? So this can be an important effect on the fundamental rights. Okay, so this can be an important criticism of it. Operational feasibility and challenges. Now, one has to properly create a system to dispose of the information complaints or information request, right? And for that, manpower is required. Now, not all parties are wealthy enough to afford such kind of a system. So here also it might actually distort. So weaker party might be needlessly burdened. Okay. So here we can say maybe some state assistance can be provided in such a situation, right? Now, conclusion. Conclusion we can make broad based, justifying the significance of transparency. So here we can say that transparency makes information available. Publicity makes it accessible. And accountability makes information actionable. So it is this that signifies the importance of transparency, that it will make the ultimate availability of information actionable, turn it into actionable. Okay, here in publicity section we might also highlight the role of media, that it is not only the level playing field has to be there for the political party, but the media should also be free from the government interference, and this can be a forward looking conclusion for us, because conclusions has to be positive, optimistic, suggestive and forward looking, right? So this is also going to be one suggestion from our side, because the transparency come in this form where transparency, publicity and accountability are the three important pillars of it, right? And it is at this publicity level that role of media will come, which can be a suggestion from our side, right? Now this one, MG Narega has been able to address the issue of rural distress in India. Discuss. Write the issues with the implementation of MG Narega. So first of all, we have to explain how far the MG Narega has been able to address the problem of rural distress. That's the first thing that we have to look into, the first part of the answer. Second is, what are the issues there regarding the implementation of this? Okay. So in the introduction, we might introduce the MG Narega itself. What is this? So this is first of all a demand driven employment guarantee scheme. The employment is available in a year 100 days of per household, and it is a statutory guarantee. So this is how you can introduce the MG Narega scheme, first thing. Okay. Second thing, you might also say that inside 15 days the employment has to be provided after the claim for employment has been registered by the person. If this is not been done, then the government has to provide unemployment allowance, right? If the employment is provided, then wages also has to be dispersed inside the 15 days. If this has not happened, then government has to compensate. Okay, so this will actually holistically introduce this particular scheme. Now we will move to the how it has been able to address the rural distress. Okay, now rural distress can be tackled by improvement in infrastructure. Okay, because there are a lot of gaps in the infrastructure, such as road, water bodies such as ponds, healthcare centers, etc. Right? So MG Narega fund can be utilized to build these things. Now once the roads are constructed, the infrastructure is built. So infrastructure is one of the highest multiplier effect. What is this multiplier effect? That means how much of growth we are receiving by investing 1 rupee, right? So if it has to be more than 1. That means if we are investing 1 rupee, then the growth that we are getting is more than 1. So this is the multiplier effect, right? And if we are investing in infrastructure, then it will increase the productivity in economy, and therefore it enhances the growth rate. Okay, so because of infrastructure creation, the rural growth will increase. This will add to the rural demand, and rural demand will further lead to higher growth. So it's going to create a virtuous cycle, right? So this will naturally create more employment opportunity and therefore reduction in rural distress. One of the important thing it will also do is the local employment opportunities will be available. Then people will not have to migrate to the urban centers, right? So this rural to urban migration will also be minimized, and therefore this will also a important benefit of it. Second thing is compensating income loss. We have seen in COVID-19, there was a reverse migration and people have lost their employment. Here, government also increased the funding for the MG Narega scheme, and therefore it compensated for the loss of the income for the people. So here also it was an important benefit that came out of it. Preventing migration to the urban areas. When the local places employment opportunities available, people will not be moving to the urban areas in large number, right? So that's one advantage of it. It will also be beneficial for the urban areas. Why? Because wage rate is a function of or is dependent on the supply of labor, right? So when the labor supply is higher in urban areas, then wage rate will also be lower. People will get less remuneration for the labor that they are putting in, right? So when the migration from rural to urban areas is curbed, then it will also help boost the wage rates in the urban areas, because then the labor supply will not increase the way it would have increased without this scheme, right? So it is also an additional benefit not only for the rural areas but also the urban areas. In urban areas also, because people will have choice whether they go for the Manrega work, or they might also go for the some work for some private individual or maybe some agricultural field. So if they do not get the adequate compensation for the work by the private individual, they have the choice to go for the public work, right? So there also they have the more bargaining power, and therefore they can extract more benefit for the private work that they are also doing. So this is also one of the important reason that it has also alleviated the rural distress in the among the workers. Okay, livelihood. Now diversification of livelihood has happened. Okay, for example, the Manrega work is not only providing the alternative source of livelihood, but it is also creating one thing. It is creating infrastructure such as ponds. Now these ponds will ultimately be used for fisheries, right? So here also diversification of the sources of livelihood is also taking place, right? Let's say at some year there is natural calamity and there is a loss of crops. In such year, people can resort to the MG Narega work and therefore they can sustain themselves. So diversification of the sources of livelihood has happened as a result of that, more stability and less rural distress, right? Now right-based approach, that means here it has been made as statutory right. So if this is not given, people can claim this, and for this we have to have grievance redressal system, right? If they are not getting employment, as I had already discussed, government is obliged to provide the unemployment allowance. If the employment is given but the remuneration is not made on time, then government also has to compensate it. So because it's a right-based approach. Okay. Now issues in the implementation. That's an important thing, right? Now corruption is an important problem here. How it happens? Fake job cards are created. Now fake job cards means bogus beneficiaries are there. Okay. Second thing, there are muster rolls. These are basically attendance sheets. Okay. So they register the attendance and it is on the basis of attendance that remuneration is provided. Here the question of bogus attendance is coming. People, if you go to visit on the ground, you will not find at many places the workers, the laborers, but all the muster rolls will be filled. They are all attended to, right? But actually on the ground there is no one to work, right? So where the money is going? Naturally it is withdrawn into somebody's account, right? So these fake job cards and bogus attendance is also a problem which leads to embezzlement of funds available for this scheme. Limited job opportunities. Many times people are seeking the employment but they are not getting the job. This is also a problem. Lack of awareness. When people are not aware, as this is the demand driven program, people has to demand the work, but if awareness is not there and where to go and demand the work, this is not there, then how will the people be demanding? So some lack of awareness is also the problem here. And it is not just lack of awareness about the demand driven nature, it is also about lack of awareness how to redress their grievances, right? That there are inbuilt system of grievances available, how to redress them. Okay. Second is bureaucratic delays. Now these muster rolls have to be filled by Rozgar Sevak. Rozgar Sevak. But what they will do? They will first fill the Kacha muster roll on paper. And they once in a week or maybe in 10 days, they visit the block where they will upload all the weeks or all the 10 days of work or muster rolls at one go on the online. Right. So already 7 to 10 days delays has already happened because the muster rolls have been uploaded lately. Right. Because they are uploaded lately, so therefore discharge of funding or wages to the people will also be delayed. Okay. Now quality of work. Many a times infrastructure which is created is of very, very poor quality. It is created just to provide work to them, right? So that is also a problem because when we are creating the assets, we have to make sure that these assets are having higher longevity and therefore quality of work is also a problem. Limited financial inclusion. Many places, many states, people do not even have bank account. Now the fund has to be directly transferred to their banks, right? So this is also a problem. Many places there are not even bank branches are there, and if the bank branches are there, they are so few that they are so overcrowded that people are very reluctant to actually get access to the services, right? So this is also a problem. Ineffective grievance redressal system. Now grievance redressal, every state government has to make rules for that, right? Many a times state governments do not bother to make the rules for grievance redressal. Many a times rules are there, but the program officer is not properly empowered to actually do that. Many a times both are there, empowerment is also there, but the willingness is not there, right? Sometimes systemic issues are also there. So ineffective grievance redressal is also there. Now wage rate is another thing. Now how do you fix the wage rate? It is fixed by the center. So wages are determined by the center. Now center uses CPI, agricultural labor, to determine on the basis of which the wages are actually calculated, right? This does not reflect the true nature of the work of the labor that is done inside the MG Narega. So activists are now demanding that consumer price index, instead of agricultural labor, we should use consumer price index rural, because the nature of work that they are doing is different from the agricultural labor. Therefore CPI, agricultural labor, cannot be used. So they have to use this. It will then reflect the true wages that has to be given to them, right? So this is another important issue in the effective implementation of it. For the conclusion side, we can say that effective implementation is very important. Why? Because it is a demand driven program. When the people know that they will work but they will not get the remuneration on time, they will either not get the work, so they will not go and seek the work, therefore they will not demand the work. If there is no demand for the work, the entire scheme will become hollow. It will only remain on paper. Therefore effective implementation is a very, very important thing, and this is how you can conclude it in a very, very optimistic note. Now the third question, the Anusandhan National Research Foundation Act 2023 aims to provide high-level strategic direction for the research, innovation and entrepreneurship in the field of natural sciences, which at present suffers from lack of adequate resources and private participation discuss. So what we have found here, certain things like overall strategic direction. When we say strategic, it is different from tactical. Strategic means long term. So this is not the play for 1 year, 1 month, 6 months. It's for long term, right? It will lead to research, innovation and entrepreneurship in the field of natural science. Second thing, presently it suffers from two things. Number one, lack of adequate resources and private participation. Okay, so this is how you have to break the question. Now, in the introduction, we have to first of all give the context according to the decoding that we have done for the question. Now, research, innovation and entrepreneurship in any country is a very, very important thing for ensuring the competitive edge. And to do the research, first of all, we need funds. Funding and investment. Then only research and development is possible. Now, countries which have huge competitive advantage in terms of technology also have one thing in common, that they are heavily investing in research and development. For example, countries such as USA and Israel are investing over and above 3% of their GDP annually on these things, right? Ideally, any country should invest at least 2% of their GDP annually on the R&D, right? And some countries are even going more than 3%. In India, in the last 2 decades, we have just around 0.7% of investment on this front, okay? And therefore, we have to boost up the funding, right? Now, nature of funding of R&D in India is it is dominated by public funding. Now, when we are talking about public funding, it comes with two kind of problem. Number one, because it is publicly funded, adequacy of funding is not there. Number two, it comes with bureaucratic red tapeism. So rules and regulations, etc. Right? Government will not give funds very easily, right? And there also some nepotism, favoritism, etc. is there. So eligible person, competent person might not at all get the funding, whereas the non-competent or less competent people will get the funding. Okay, so this is bureaucratic red tapeism is also a problem, right? So it is in this context we have to see that government has brought in this reform. So this particular organization is actually there to get rid of these problems. So this is how you introduce it, and then we will come to the body. So it will address the resource scarcity first of all. So it increases the funding. So for next 5 years it is proposed that 50,000 crores will be coming from the public sector. But this is not the only target of it. Government also wants to attract private investment. So government is saying that we are going to bring in 50,000 crore in the next 5 years, so that private partnership can also be enhanced. So it will lead to crowd in of private investment in this sector. Because even if we see the USA and Germany and Israel, private participation is very, very significant, whereas in India, private participation in this is just around 35% of our overall funding, right? So it will increase the crowding in. Okay. Infrastructure development is also very, very important, because we need labs, we also need skills, etc. Right? So this infrastructure development will be there. Improved resource allocation. Now, when you have strategic direction by an organization which is nothing but whose governing council is directly headed by the Prime Minister himself, which also bring about people from the industries, from the government and scientific academic community, then overall strategic direction will be given. And there it will be decided which sector we need to focus more, given the present circumstances. For example, today is the hour of Industrial 4.0 revolution, right? So we are talking about semiconductors, we are talking about Internet of Things, we are talking about 5G, 6G, etc. Right? So where we have to locate or allocate the fund, right? In which sector we need how much of fund, that overall strategic direction will come from this, right? Under the guidance of Prime Minister himself. Okay. So it will lead to improved resource allocation. Where we need more resources, we will allocate accordingly. Where we need less resources, less important areas, we will allocate accordingly. We will have to understand one thing, that there is something called Moore's law. Now this law says that every 1.5 year to 2 year, the size of chip is becoming smaller. That means for the same size of chip, we are able to fit twice as many as transistors than we were able to fit 1.5 year or 2 year earlier. That means it is shrinking. When it is shrinking, it is also becoming faster, right? So you can say that today we are going with 5G, tomorrow within 2-3 years you will have 6G, because the chips have become twice as smaller as earlier, right? And they also become twice as faster as earlier, right? So you can imagine the pace with which the technological changes are happening. This is what the Moore's law predict. Now we cannot afford to lag behind in such a fast pace, right? So therefore overall strategic direction can be given by the higher authority that we need to allocate more funding to this area, because it is far more strategic than other areas. Because artificial intelligence is coming. Earlier we used to train particular artificial system 3 hours. Now the same system can be trained in just 88 seconds by feeding the data into it, right? So processes have become very, very faster, because we are moving towards nanoscales. As the size of gate compresses, the electrons are moving faster traveling faster across it, and so the processing and computation speed is increasing. So it has to be provided a proper strategic direction to it, right? Now, encouraging private partnership. Okay. Now, as I have already said, that the objective is to crowd in, right? Crowd in private investment. Ultimately, we have to take the technology from lab to market. And it has to happen with the entrepreneurs, with the private partnership, because ultimately they are going to take it to the market, right? If the technology is there but it only remains in the lab, it is not executed, then there is no use. So private partnership and promoting entrepreneurship is not only required for enhancing funding, but it is also ensuring that from lab to market transition is also happening. So this is also one of the important benefit of it. Streamlined regulations. When you brought in the private partnership, naturally they will put pressure on the government to bring in proper regulations to reduce the red tapeism, right? So this body is also created in such line, that structure is designed in such line that overall there the rules and regulations should also be simplified so that private people are not needlessly harassed. Okay. Now, associated challenges. First of all, effective implementation will always be challenged, right? So governance structure has to be properly streamlined accordingly. Then industry readiness. The attitude of industry towards this have already developed because of the past experiences. Now, attitude is nothing but the reflection of experiences, right? So if a particular cricket team loses 9 out of 10 times, then the person who will watch its 11th match will assume that it will again lose, because of the past experience, his attitude has formed like that. Okay. Now, because people know or industry know that there is always bureaucratic delays and the rules and regulation will be difficult for them to navigate the situation. Okay. So they will not be ready, right? So we also need to ensure that we are actually setting the positive example so that their attitude is also changing, right? So industry readiness is also there. Number 2 is that these investment going to show return in the very longer term. It's not that today you invest and day after tomorrow, after 6 months or one year, you get the benefit of it. You have to persist, you have to invest in, and you expect that after 5 to 6 or 10 years, the returns will be coming. The returns will be handsome, there is no doubt, but one has to have willingness to take that risk. So therefore, industry readiness is also one of the important challenges in this regard also. Focus on societal needs, that is important. Now, if any research and innovation is completely detached from the need of the society, then that is what is the point of the research, right? So this is what is important. We have to see as associated challenges. Now, in conclusion, you can easily sum up whatever your arguments are there, that we have to ensure that you can cite the example of Moore's law, right? So we have to ensure the competitive edge because technology is changing very fast. So today we invest, the product that we will be creating by the time it is possible that world will move far ahead of us, right? So this is how you can conclude and highlight the necessity and urgency of such kind of reform, right? So when you highlight the urgency of your arguments, then examiner will also be forced to award you, right? Because he will also feel ki, haan yaar, this is very, very urgent. So that person is right. So let me give him marks, right? So try to sometimes also highlight the urgency in support of your argument. So thanks for watching the video.